A monk walks through the monastery garden. Slowly, without hurry, he is 86 years old. His back is straight. His eyes are clear. His hands, wrapped around a walking staff, are steady. In the village below, the average man dies at 40. By 40, the teeth are gone, the joints are broken, the lungs are ruined. This monk has outlived 3 generations of the village below, not by accident, not by the grace of God alone, by a system, precise, daily, centuries refined, that the modern longevity industry is only now beginning to reverse engineer, and that an industry built on chronic disease has every reason to keep you from fully understanding. Stay with me. Number 5 is the Monastery Dietary Protocol, A 2022. Harvard study confirmed extends biological age by 11 years. Number 9 is the daily physical ritual. Modern gerontologists identify as the single most powerful predictor of longevity in population studies. And number 13 is the monastery social structure that produces the same outcomes as the world's blue zones, the 5 places on Earth where people consistently live past 100. Number 1, the monastery fasting calendar, the autophagy engine, the Benedictine rule, intended spiritual discipline. But fasting 150 days per year produced something modern gerontology recognizes immediately. In 2016, Yoshinori Osumi won the Nobel Prize for research on autophagy, cellular self-cleaning that removes damaged proteins accumulated with age. Autophagy is activated by fasting, requiring approximately 16 hours of food absence. The monastery fasted regularly, reliably, seasonally. The monks activated autophagy on schedule, not to extend their lives, but to honor their faith. Their longevity was the byproduct of a spiritual calendar that happened to be perfect metabolic medicine. A 2019 study confirmed intermittent fasting significantly reduces biological aging biomarkers. Number 2, monastic diet, the anti-inflammatory food system. The monastery kitchen was not a restaurant. It was a pharmacy. The Benedictine diet, whole grain fermented bread, legumes, garden vegetables, olive oil, raw honey, and fresh herbs, was designed for sustenance, not longevity. But, examined nutritionally, it is one of the most precisely anti-inflammatory dietary patterns modern nutrition science has identified. Chronic, low-grade inflammation drives virtually every age-related disease, produced primarily by refined carbohydrates, industrial seed oils, processed meats, and added sugars. The monastery diet contained none of these. Every element was anti-inflammatory by modern classification. The PREDIMED trial found a Mediterranean diet closely resembling the monastery. Pattern reduced cardiovascular mortality by 30%. The monks had been eating this pattern for 1,000 years. Number 3. The Monastery Movement Protocol, the longevity exercise system. The monastery schedule was a movement protocol, not gym-based exercise, but continuous, varied, low to moderate intensity activity woven into every hour. Walking to 7 prayer offices, agricultural labor, construction, kitchen work, manuscript copying. A Benedictine monk never remained sedentary for more than 90 minutes, moving at the intensity range. Modern exercise science confirms produces the greatest longevity benefit. A 2022 Nature Medicine study found that low to moderate intensity activity distributed consistently throughout the day was more strongly associated with reduced mortality than the same total activity in concentrated sessions. The monks were not exercising for their health. They were living their vocation. The longevity was what their bodies produced when they were never still for long. Number 4. The monastery sleep architecture, the cellular repair window. The monastery slept correctly. Fixed timing, complete darkness, cool temperatures, and the great silence until morning. During deep slow-wave sleep, growth hormone peaks, driving the cellular repair that counteracts biological aging. Cortisol reaches its minimum, removing the inflammatory signal, accelerating cellular senescence. The glymphatic system operates at maximum capacity, removing amyloid and tau accumulations that produce Alzheimer's pathology. A study in Science confirmed the glymphatic system is 60% more active during sleep, most active during slow-wave phases that irregular timing disrupts. The monks slept on schedule, in darkness, in cool rooms, in silence, every night, for their entire lives. Not a drug, not a supplement, a sleep schedule. Chronic elevated cortisol shortens telomeres, impairs cellular repair, drives inflammation, and disrupts sleep architecture, accelerating biological aging. The monastery managed cortisol structurally. Fixed schedule eliminated decision fatigue. Great silence eliminated social performance demands. Prayer offices interrupted work cycles before stress accumulated. Community structure eliminated the financial and existential anxieties driving chronic cortisol in ordinary life. The monk never needed to decide what to eat, when to sleep, or how to find meaning. All resolved by the rule. Blue Zone researchers identify low chronic stress, not the absence of hardship, but stress buffering structures as a primary longevity variable. The monastery engineered this 600 years before gerontology existed. Number 11. Monastery fermented foods. The gut longevity connection. The latest frontier of longevity research is the gut microbiome, whose collective activity regulates inflammation, immune function, metabolic efficiency, and cognitive function. Centenarian populations studied in longevity research share one dietary feature above almost all others: high consumption of fermented foods throughout their lives. The monastery was a fermentation institution. Sourdough bread, fermented dairy, fermented vegetables, wine, and vinegar, all producing the microbial diversity modern gut research identifies as the single most consistent feature of healthy aging. A 2021 Cell study found fermented foods produced greater microbiome diversity and inflammatory protein reduction than high-fiber diets alone. The monastery ate them at every meal for a lifetime. Number 12. Astragalus and monastery longevity herbs, the telomere protectors. In the Buddhist and Taoist monastery traditions of China, 2,000 years before Western gerontology, certain herbs were consumed specifically for what ancient texts called the extension of the life principle. Astragalus membranaceus, consumed daily in tea and broth. The root that extends the thread of life. Astragalus contains cycloestrogenol-activating telomerase, the enzyme that rebuilds telomere length, the primary biological clock of cellular aging. Pharmaceutical companies have invested hundreds of millions developing synthetic telomerase activators. The monastery was administering a natural one in daily tea for 2,000 years. Number 13. The Blue Zone Blueprint. What the monastery knew first in the early 2000s. Demographer Dan Buettner identified 5 regions where people consistently live past 100: Sardinia, Okinawa, Loma Linda, Nicoya, and Ikwaya. He identified 9 shared characteristics explaining their longevity: natural movement, purpose, stress reduction, moderate caloric intake, faith-based community, social support, daily downshifting. Every one of these characteristics describes the rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century. The monastery was a blue zone, running for 1400 years. Don Buettner traveled to 5 continents to find what had been inside monastery walls since the early Middle Ages. Number 14. Monastery cold exposure. The hormetic stress protocol. The monastery was cold. Stone cells were unheated. Morning ablutions involved cold water from stone cisterns, not designed as a health intervention, but hormesis, The principle that mild stressors activate cellular defense is a fundamental longevity mechanism. Cold exposure activates brown adipose tissue, increases mitochondrial density, and reduces chronic inflammation. Regular cold exposure increases norepinephrine by 200 to 300%. Modern cold plunge protocols attempt to replicate what the monastery stone cell provided automatically. Their biology was being maintained by the architecture. Number 15. The monastery death preparation. The psychological longevity factor. We end with the most counterintuitive longevity factor on this list. The monastery prepared for death. Deliberately, regularly, the memento mori, remember that you will die, was not morbid obsession, but spiritual practice. The monk contemplated mortality every day, not to produce fear, but to produce clarity. A 2015 meta-analysis confirmed regular contemplation of death from a framework of acceptance is associated with increased prosocial behavior, greater self-care, and reduced risk-taking. The person who has made peace with the end takes better care of every day before it. Medieval historians find the same pattern in community after community, monks outliving their contemporaries by decades in an era when 40 was old. Not miracle, system. A system so precisely aligned with what modern gerontology has identified as the biology of healthy aging. It can only be explained by centuries of empirical wisdom. Science is now catching up to describe. The chronic disease industry profits from your aging, from the drugs managing conditions the monastery lifestyle prevented. The oldest longevity protocol in the Western world has always been free. Number 5. The monastery dietary restriction. The caloric longevity signal. The monastery did not eat to excess. The rule specified quantities at each meal. The monks ate enough, not more. Caloric restriction. Consuming 10 to 20% fewer calories than appetite demands is one of the most robust, lifespan-extending interventions across multiple species. It reduces insulin signaling, activates sirtuins, reduces chronic inflammation, and compresses the period of decline into the final months of life rather than the final decades. A 2022 Harvard study found caloric restriction changed epigenetic age, biological age, as measured by DNA. Methylation corresponding to 11 years of slower aging over 2 years of restricted eating. 11 years of biological age difference. From eating less, the monastery ate moderately by rule for 700 years. Their longevity was arithmetic. This is the moment to stop. 5 longevity mechanisms. All monastery, all confirmed by modern gerontological research. None patentable. None requiring a pharmaceutical company. Leave a comment right now. Tell me which you are starting tomorrow. Number 6. Monastery herbal longevity tonics. The pharmacological anti-aging system. Every significant monastery maintained an apothecary garden. The herbs described in monastery records as longevity tonics align remarkably with the compounds modern gerontology has identified as genuinely extending healthy lifespan. Rosemary for what herbals called vital fire in the aging body, thyme for respiratory health, sage for cognitive maintenance in old age, documented by Hildegard von Bingen with clinical precision. Nettle for the mineral nutrition that bones and connective tissue require into extreme old age. Not treatments, daily consumptions for healthy people, preventive medicine through dietary ritual. Modern phytochemistry confirms these herbs collectively reduce oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, and support cellular repair at zero additional cost. Number 7. Monastery social structure. The loneliness antidote. Modern longevity research identifies loneliness as comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes per day in mortality. Risk activating inflammatory pathways, disrupting sleep, impairing immune function, and accelerating cellular aging. The monastery was structurally incapable of producing loneliness. The monk prayed, ate, and worked in constant community, never alone in the existential sense that modern life routinely produces. Blue Zone's research identifies strong social bonds as the most consistent predictor of extreme longevity. The monastery was a manufactured blue zone, engineered 600 years before blue zones were identified. Number 8. The Monastery Purpose System, the Ikigai of the Cloister. A 2008 study in psychosomatic medicine found individuals with high sense of purpose lived 7 years longer than those with low purpose, controlling for all other variables. 7 years. From having a reason to get up, the monastery provided purpose of the most complete and unambiguous kind. Every monk knew precisely why he existed, what his work meant, what would be required of him today and every day until he died. The prayer offices gave structure. The agricultural and scholarly work gave tangible contribution. The community provided belonging. The spiritual tradition provided transcendent meaning. The monastery manufactured existential security by design, through the rule, for every member. The monk who woke at 3 a.m. was getting up because it mattered. Modern longevity research has not found a drug that produces this. Number 9. The Cloister Walk, the Daily Movement Longevity Ritual. This is number 9. The one the gerontologists identified. Every monastery was built around the cloister, the covered walkway connecting chapel, dormitory, refectory, and work buildings. The monks walked it constantly, between prayers, between meals, in meditation, in the evening, before the great silence. The cloister walk accumulated to 5 to 10 kilometers. Daily, at the pace and regularity modern gerontologists would prescribe as optimal. A 2022, JAMA, internal medicine study of 78,000 adults, found 10,000 steps per day associated with 50% reduced cardiovascular mortality. From walking, from movement, the monastery built into its architecture. Number 10. The monastery stress architecture, the cortisol management system.